For centuries, Tibet has always been enveloped in mysteries and legends. People who have lived in the mountains for ages have created their own civilization, which is often considered a looking glass of the modern world in terms of traditions and way of life. And it was considered as such in ancient times as well, when human life on any continent was not noted for its simplicity. Both historians and researchers, of course, are specifically interested in the attitude towards women in Tibet. And it has to be said that despite the many bizarre and even, to put it in modern terminology, somewhat ugly aspects of the life of ancient Tibetan women, their attitude to them is more than respectful. The topic of this episode is not so pleasant secrets of lives of ancient Tibetan women. You're watching Flip Side of History. Let's continue this episode. Ancient Tibetan writings explicitly state that woman is the foundation of all things. At all times, the main principle of a Tibetan woman was to live not for herself, but for others. Life solely for the sake of her own happiness and well-being was never accepted by Tibetan women. However, these same views created quite unusual traditions, which today can be conventionally called unsightly and even dirty. Relationships before marriage. Many people have seen that women adorn themselves with necklaces made of coins. But it was in ancient Tibet that a girl's necklace had a very different meaning. In addition to being a piece of jewelry, this adornment was in essence a record of a woman's premarital affairs. Each coin or ring hanging on the necklace was a gift from the lover, who was obliged by tradition to give something to the young woman. And a large number of such gift jewelry was not considered something shameful, and Tibetans tolerated it quite loyally. Interestingly, if a woman spent the night with a foreigner, he was obliged to give her a piece of coral pearl. The pearls in the necklace immediately raised the status of the girl in comparison with the others. Moreover, there was a real hunt for such pearls among women. Well, of course, premarital relations also implicate the possibility that the girl would become pregnant. Interestingly, the father of the child, with the exception of foreigners, had practically no responsibility to the girl. He had to work for the family of his beloved for a month, after which he was released in peace. From that moment on, the question of paternity was no longer raised, and the child became just ordinary, so to speak, in the family. Even in modern Tibet, women's behavior can be interpreted as plain promiscuity, but Tibetans themselves do not think so. And in ancient times it was even more common. For one example, a young woman could have a bond with someone from another settlement, who periodically came to live with his beloved. Moreover, the woman could even have several children from such an unofficial husband. But pregnancy and the birth of a child, as mentioned before, was not considered a shame. On the contrary, the birth of a child by a Tibetan woman was just appreciated. And this, by the way, is a confirmation of the fact that since ancient times, a Tibetan woman in her status had much more rights than even a modern European woman. All stereotypes about downgrading and humiliation are immediately broken by the attitude that is shown towards a woman in Tibet. The position of the Tibetan woman as compared to the man, especially in the provinces, can be said to be superior even to the ideal of the Western woman, if we bear in mind the concept of equality between the sexes. Polygamy. It's nonetheless important here that in Tibet at some time there was a serious shortage of men, then accordingly women. So gender relations were regulated by Tibetan traditions, depending on any given situation. When there were few men, women held almost an entire household, eventually becoming completely self-reliant and independent. But the shortage of men led to the simple fact that a tradition of polygamy was formed in Tibet. But interestingly, only wealthy people could afford to support several wives. And polygamy itself, unlike the harems of the East, had a completely different meaning, just to survive normally and just pretty much to live. Interestingly, polygamy in Tibet often had one remarkable feature. A man was taken as a husband by his sisters. And it was not the man who got married, yes, but the man who was taken as a husband, no matter how strange it may sound today. Moreover, contrary to European customs, it was not the wives who entered the husband's house, but the husband entered the house of his wives, even taking women's surname. If there is no son in the family but there is daughter, then the daughter's husband enters the wife's family, takes her surname, and in property relations occupies a position which is subordinate to his wife. Such unions in Tibet were the most commonplace. For instance, if the husband of one of the sisters died, then she could enter the family of the other sister, becoming the second fully equal wife. A wife's daughter could also become the wife of her mother's husband before marriage. And there were quite a lot of such options for connecting families. And this was considered absolutely normal. This may have been one of the reasons that the children were common in the family, because in such a relationship it is possible to say with confidence who the father is only in one case, when it's affirmed that it was from him and not from her deceased husband that the woman became pregnant. Other strange aspects. The second option for the merging of families in Tibet was a completely opposite tradition, polyandry. That is, one woman received several husbands at once. And again, Tibetan traditions even changed polyandry beyond recognition. One woman could have several official men, but she had to subject to certain rules. Firstly, all men had to be brothers. Moreover, only the elder brother officially married, and the younger one simply entered the family. The order of the woman's visit was determined immediately. The priority, of course, was the elder brother, and the younger ones got the opportunity to visit their spouse only after seeing a sign, empty shoes standing in front of the door. So theoretically, a woman had the opportunity to live not with her own men. To do this, she had to obtain her husband's approval. There are cases when 3 different men lived with one woman at once. The second variation of polyandry was the entry of a stepmother to marry her stepsons, her husband's children from her first official marriage. Look, in general, it is quite difficult to understand Tibet and who can live with whom and by which exact rules. But at the same time, families where there were several wives or husbands, surprisingly enough, lived quite wonderfully. Perhaps such views were influenced by the harsh life and not the most pleasant living conditions. By the way, if brothers who were married to one woman could not conceive offspring, then they had every reason to invite another, an outsider, to the family, and if necessary, also yet another one. In this whole context, the fate of a widow or widower in Tibet was decided quite simply. If desired, the widow could marry her husband's brother, and the widower respectively could marry the sister of the deceased wife. And even if both sides had either a man or a woman, this did not create any special obstacles. The main thing at the end of the day is that there is a desire, and everything else will be set. The wedding. With such views, it is quite outstanding that wedding traditions in Tibet are both important and spelled out seriously and scrupulously. Moreover, the main and most important person was the groom's maternal uncle. In essence, everything depended on him. It was he who came to the village of his future wife, it was he who evaluated her. And at the wedding, the groom's maternal uncle is the most honored guest out of all. The bride was prepared for this event long and carefully, washing her with milk, vinegar, and salt. It is believed that it brings good luck. The wedding itself lasted and continues nowadays to last from 3 to 4 days. What is striking is that both the bride and the groom sing songs in which the man gives a guarantee that everything will be fine, in response to requests to take care of the bride. On the part of the bride, songs were sung like, "Took our beloved woman, take care of her, and we wish you all the best, and we will throw roses all your path." And the groom and his friends answered somewhere quite sharply, "Please leave us alone. We will be able to take care of the bride. She will be happy." By the way, it was thought to be truly Vugish to come to the bride on a white horse, since horses in Tibet are a symbol of prosperity and a happy life. Perhaps it was from Tibet that the modified phrase, "prince on a white horse," came to modern world as well. After the ceremonies, the uncle took the bride to the groom's house and a red ribbon was laid out along the way, along which the bride returned home after the first day. At their core, Tibetans are perhaps the most, so to speak, progressive and democratic people on our planet. There were no prohibitions and taboos in relationships. Since ancient times, Tibetans have not had such a thing as promiscuity. All relations were considered in the order of things, and the reasons were, as already mentioned, difficult living conditions and the desire to preserve both the family and, obviously, the land. By the way, the issue of land was mainly the cause of polygamy and all other options for living together. If in Europe the land was divided among the male heirs, then in Tibet, in fact, it was not divided in any kind of way, remaining under the control of the family. And the entrance to the family itself often consisted of several options. Members of one family completely merged with members of another. And there, in reality, it became almost impossible to understand who was with whom. Thank you for watching our episode. Leave a like and consider subscribing to Flip Side of History if you enjoy our content.